It was definitely love at first sight. He's tall and handsome and has a very cute giggle. He's a grazier, you know. We married in Mayfair after just 3 weeks.
And so began the extraordinary love match of Donald Scobie Mackinnon and his Hollywood bride, Claire Adams. They were married on April the 1st, 1937. Theirs is an enduring adventure that brought Hollywood to the Australian bush. Their own private Hollywood on a Victorian Western District property with the beguiling name of MOORAMONG. A Cambridge rowing reunion and the pre-coronation celebrations for King George VI drew both Claire Adams and Donald Scobie Mackinnon to England from different sides of the world. And when the wedding was announced, celebrity newspapers from as far away as the US and Australia recorded the love match. A love match that would take Claire away from a stellar career in Hollywood forever.
Scobie was given MOORAMONG for his 21st birthday from his father, LKS Mackinnon. Scobie actually wasn't in Australia at that time. He was at Cambridge University studying history, but a Rolls Royce as a present was sent to him for his birthday there.
LKS Mackinnon made all his money in Australia. He was a partner in a very well-established law firm called Blake and Rigall, now known as Blake Dawson.
Scobie had no background in farming and LKS was a solicitor, but they always seemed to have very good managers on the property. He was a bachelor in his late 20s. He had 12,000 acres of MOORAMONG and he was a very eligible catch. He was a shy, quiet person, but he seemed to fit in very well.
Scobie's mother, Jessie, passed away when he was in his youth, and his sister, Margaret, also died at a young age. He was educated at Geelong Grammar and went on to study at Cambridge University in England, where he was the rowing captain at Jesus College in 1927.
He returned to England in 1937 to a rowing reunion at Cambridge, and he happened to meet Claire at a party in Piccadilly, and the story goes that their eyes met across the room and that Claire said to someone, "That's the man I'm going to marry." And within 3 weeks they were married.
Nobody seemed to notice or care that Claire was a little older than Scobie.
Scobie is written in at 31 years of age and Claire at 33, but we know that she was actually about 42, but she certainly didn't look it.
Everyone said he looked like Clark Gable. He certainly did. Even I could see that as a child, seeing him, and you almost sort of thought you were on the set of Gone with the Wind.
Claire was in England at the time on broadcasting, singing on the radio. So she was quite well known anyway. And of course, when it was announced in Australia, it probably caused a minor sensation.
Claire and Scobie began their married life with an extravagant honeymoon that lasted for 12 months.
She must have introduced Scobie to movie making because of her background, and they seemed to film everywhere they went. They took stills or movies all the way through.
Their travels took them across Europe, from Scotland and the ancestral home of the Mackinnons at Druidsdale on the Isle of Skye, to romantic Paris, the city of love. And then they set sail on the Queen Mary for America. Here, Claire had the chance to introduce her handsome new husband to the family. Her only brother, Gerald Drayson Adams, was an acclaimed movie script writer. He won the Screenwriters Award for the classic Elvis Presley movie, Kissin' Cousins. Claire had two sisters, Muriel, who was a stage performer, and a younger sister, Barbara.
Whenever a camera was rolling and she was in front of it, she would start acting, there's no doubt about that. Everyone said, look, she wouldn't stay because she's straight out of Hollywood, lived in Beverly Hills. It's not going to happen out in the Western District. But what they didn't realise, she was actually born and bred in Canada, out in the plains near Winnipeg. And so she was used to open country. She loved horses and adored dogs. So MOORAMONG wasn't too bad. And of course she adored this new husband of hers. And he just absolutely doted on her.
Well, I think a lot of people wondered how she would fit in and how long she'd last. You know, they all sort of thought whether would it be long where she got before Hollywood or the brighter lights called her back.
Everyone sort of was agog to see what the bride was, and a little bit strange. We didn't know what to expect, but once we'd seen her, we were quite impressed.
And I think the whole village was so excited when they married that we were all very interested in seeing what she looked like and all that sort of thing. Sticky beaks, I guess.
It was a great love match. And, you know, there were some stories at one stage that she was a gold digger and had come and grabbed one of Melbourne's most eligible bachelors. Well, of course, that is absolutely without base because Claire, in her own right, was a very wealthy woman.
It was like a fairy story from the word go.
It wasn't until March 1938 that Scobie and Claire finally sailed into Sydney. The harbour bridge was just opened, and Sydney was on show. Claire captured the moment, her first view of Australian shores, through the lens of her Bell & Howell film camera. Their arrival in Australia, complete with their 1935 Bentley convertible.
So this is MOORAMONG. How lovely.
Claire gave up Hollywood to become Mrs. Donald Mackinnon, for a life on the land in the wealthy Victorian Western District, among those hardy souls known as the squattocracy. She was well armed for engagement, with her trusty cameras and an obsession with animals. MOORAMONG means place of water, and as for her new home in the bush, Claire almost immediately set about transforming the staid homestead into what some described as a jazz folly.
They employed Marcus Martin, a prominent architect in Melbourne, and she wanted to design him to design a house similar that she was used to in Beverly Hills, and the white stucco walls on the outside is very, very similar to what she was living in Beverly Hills. It's totally unusual to see anything else like this anywhere in Australia. And also the pool. It was the largest private pool in Victoria when it was built, so it was massive, and it's heated as well. It holds something like 300,000 litres. It was just at the end of the Depression, and things were extremely tight, and you wonder how they got the materials and the furniture and all these pieces together for the homestead, but somehow she did, and it was then right on the outbreak of the Second World War. But they must have just got the materials they needed and the fittings just in time. She brought a lot of that Art Deco influence that she was used to in Beverly Hills to MOORAMONG. Well, the bathrooms are rather spectacular. Their own bathroom has a massive shower with a large rose head on the top, but also two coming from the side, and a light in it. There's also a bidet and a toilet in the room, and her mirrors, and you can see the Hollywood influence there, that she was never scared of a mirror. There's lights all around it, as you would expect a star to have.
Everything reminds, the furniture and the thing, you'd almost feel you're on some of the Hollywood film sets. And nothing's been changed since, with the marvellous satin brocades and the sort of overstuffed cushions and things, all very much Hollywood, and especially Claire's bedrooms with all the mirrors. Now, that was a new thing too, to have so many mirrors around the house. Remember coming out to MOORAMONG, a plumber, and he said, I thought they were very funny fellas that lived in MOORAMONG, because he said they had two dunnies, and they must have liked to sit there and chat to one another. He had no idea it was a bidet.
Because everything was very exciting and modern here, my mother had to compete a little bit, so we got our bathrooms all redecorated. And of course, it wasn't Laminex, but we had some very expensive yellow glass cut with a machine and made to look a little bit like Hollywood. We didn't know what Hollywood looked like, but anyway, exciting things happened, and little mirrors round the top of the glass. So we thought we had Mum thought we had very special bathrooms. So.
Wanted a bluish-green colour when I painted the outside of the house. So we got some blue paint and green paint. She picked them out. And we had to mix them together with a spoon because we wanted to know the right quantity. Oh no, that's too blue. Put a bit of green in. Oh, don't know about that. Might want a little bit more. And she kept on going until I lost count of what was what. Anyway, we got the right colour. When she'd gone, I just tipped some blue into the green and mixed it all up and put it on. She said, "What colour is that?" "What colour would you call that?" I said, "It's Mackinnon green." And I said, "You're the only one in Australia with that colour." But she didn't know I'd just mix them up.
There's a lovely Steinway piano that Claire ordered, and apparently she didn't like the first one, which is rather strange, but she ordered another one and she wanted it white, as they often had in Hollywood, but Steinway refused. So it is special in the fact that it's walnut and obviously made especially for her.
And that she was a very good-looking woman, very beautiful dark hair, with the, I don't know what kind of flower it was, but a huge flower behind her ear. So she looked terribly glamorous. So it's no wonder us young girls thought it was just wonderful.
There was a lot of competition around the district, and everybody loved to come here for curiosity, and they enjoyed the hospitality.
In my adolescence, 12 to 14, 15, the thing that I used to love to do on a special occasion, because we had no petrol, was to go to MOORAMONG to swim in the beautiful swimming pool. It often was a roaring north wind outside, and we used to go into this haven of beautiful green grass, beautiful glistening blue swimming pool. And my mother used to go into the house, and we girls, both the same age, would be left to our own devices. So we would go to the dressing rooms, and we would sometimes not put on our bathers. We would put on Aunt Claire's bathers and her bathing cap, and then we would smother our faces with Elizabeth Arden face cream, which was always in abundance. I mean, we'd never seen face cream in our lives. And then we would plunge into the swimming pool thinking we were Esther Williams.
I first came here it was a Red Cross garden party, and when I saw the pool, I'd never seen anything so magnificent in all my life, having been used to swimming in dams and just the local swimming pool, which wasn't as smart as it is now.
After the renovations, the talk of the nearby village of Skipton was the MOORAMONG Games Room, complete with a green leather Art Deco cocktail bar.
Cocktails in the Western District certainly were introduced by Claire because it was quite used to them in America, of course.
They brought a whole new way of entertaining. Previously, if you went out to dinner, you were given a sherry before dinner. But when they came to MOORAMONG, they had this marvellous bar with the cocktail shaker, and they literally brought cocktails and mixed drinks of all sorts. And I would say it was probably the cocktail hour of to Skipton and District.
While cocktails became popular, so were the Mackinnons' movie nights. The cinematographer in this vignette is Scobie, and the scene is set in Claire's parents' home, where she stars opposite her own family members.
She was just loved anything to do with films, and it's quite fascinating, having done so much with it earlier on, that she was still hooked on it in later life. Well, she certainly brought that Hollywood influence to the bush. It's amazing some of the things that she put in place in the home. And obviously the way she entertained was totally different to anything anyone had seen in this district. And her reputation for having parties was renowned. They had an extraordinary social life, and people regularly stayed up here. They might be from Hollywood. They may be screenwriters or people that she acted with. Evie Hayes had stayed up here with her husband. There's just reams of people that seem to come here to stay. They're very kind, social people.
In the late 40s, Claire's father, Stanley Adams, made Australia and MOORAMONG his home as well.
Stanley Adams, her father, stayed here on a regular basis, and I think he spent quite a few years during the war. He might have been trapped here, actually, because he was in many of the benefit concerts with Claire, playing the piano while Claire sang. He was a trained opera singer. He'd trained at La Scala in Italy and was a music teacher in Canada and England.
I remember meeting you in September '62. We were eating both of us, and the meeting happened thus. Accidental on the road, sentimental episode. I was gushing.
He certainly had that background, both in acting and in music, and he was affectionately known as Pop Adams in the district. And yes, he seemed to be involved with Scobie as well, whether it was in rabbit drives or whatever, but he was well known around the district.
Any money? Not a bit, but rather funny. Wasn't it? While we played in her people, how delighted people were.
He was a very outward-going, generous man. And used to adore Claire naturally, and he used to take part in everything that Claire and Scobie did.
I was 10. That was many years ago. Don't.
I can see her in her blue velvet dress under the lights on the horse stage in Skipton, and the chiffon hanky being pulled through her hands all the time, very glamorous. And father there admiring her and clapping, and then he would sing too, and they'd sing together, sing duets.
Il ne me reste. You say il ne, it's il ne.
He continued to give Claire singing lessons and remained a demanding teacher.
Ne, N-E-O, ne. What did I say? You sounded like now to me. Il ne me reste rien. That's the wrong note you're saying there. Isn't it? Il ne me reste, that's the note to sing. Didn't I sing it? Didn't I sing it?
Scobie's return to MOORAMONG with a Hollywood bride didn't impress everyone. A Mackinnon cousin who had successfully worked the property with Scobie before the marriage always felt edged out by Claire. He was property manager Lon Chaney.
Scobie Donald Mackinnon and his wife Claire Nee Adams were my godparents. Scobie's father LKS and my grandfather D.D. Mackinnon, I believe, were something like second cousins, something along those lines. Dad had been a manager of a property over in West Australia and wanted a job back in Victoria, and his father apparently got in touch with Scobie and said, my son Alan would like to actually come over and work in Victoria. And so they set up this job for Dad, which was managing MOORAMONG. Well, he was the manager of the property. He ran the whole show. What's happened was that Scobie said, look, can you manage this property? I'm going away for 4 years. When he first got to MOORAMONG, the performance of the property, it was a sheep property, I gather, mainly, was not as good as it could have been, and he claimed that he had in fact improved it over the 5 years by 50% of production. When Scobie came back with Claire from overseas, apparently initially Scobie had said, this is fantastic, I'm going to go and see my lawyer and you'll get 5% of the profits from MOORAMONG because of the great job you've done, thanks a lot Alan. As it turned out, this did not occur. I believe my dad always felt a little bit like he'd been dudded ever since after that. If you like, the fly in the ointment was, in fact, Claire, who I think, in a sense, I don't think she and my father ever got on very well at all, and I think that Dad felt that she'd influenced Scobie to resent Alan. Dad enlisted and went off to fight in Tobruk. Scobie stayed at home, ran the farm. Dad, I think, thought that Claire was a rather cheap sort of American actress type. So I just don't think they got on at all. Now, who was right and who was wrong, who's to know? But they still must have been friends enough to enable both Scobie and Claire to come to my christening. Anyway, all of a sudden we're invited to MOORAMONG. And my mother had died about a year before, and we went up there and we were put into the staff quarters, which had been renovated. Dad immediately got his back up and thought this was a bit rough, you know, blow to the pride, etc. And, you know, muttered to me something like, oh, I bet that's Claire, you know, etc. I remember Claire being very bubbly and bright and bouncy and talking a lot about Hollywood. We stayed for, 3 or 4 days and then drove off and, that was it. I think Dad let it niggle at him a little bit too much, I think I sensed that I kind of wish that he'd been able to reconcile with them. You look back, we all went our different ways and that's about the best you can say.
MOORAMONG did thrive with good management, and Scobie too became a hands-on farmer. Animals, and particularly dogs, seemed to take the place of children, especially for Claire. Some would say she was obsessed by them.
Dogs played a great part of Claire's life. She just seemed to absolutely dote on dogs, and it didn't matter what breed as long as it had 4 legs and it barked, I think she loved it. And she was the life governor of Lord Smith's Dogs Home. And the story goes that she'd be regularly down there and want to know what was happening to the dogs, and they'd say, well, we can't find owners, I guess they'll have to be put down. And she'd reply, put them on the train and send them up to MOORAMONG, and they'd become part of the rabbit pack.
And she did take quite a few dogs back to MOORAMONG, stray animals that they couldn't find homes for at the hospital. And she was always going and, looking into the kennels and seeing what was at the hospital. And she was very, very kind. The blind spaniel at MOORAMONG, I think she adopted him from the hospital because she gave the money. I think she gave £2 to the hospital to try and fix his eyes because he had very bad eyes, the dog. He was a stray that they brought in. And I think somehow he ended up at MOORAMONG. But Lady Lyle was one of the founders of the hospital with Mrs. Lord Smith. Some very famous women that were on the board in those days. Oh, of course, Dame Mabel, she is one of the people that sort of befriended Claire. And anything that needed doing, she'd say, oh, look, I'll do it. But she was able to because she had the money and she loved giving to the animals, you see. That was a wonderful thing she used to do.
My grandmother-in-law, Dame Mabel Brooks, was one of Claire's closest friends, and they worked together with the Lord Smith Hospital, of course. It was one of their favourite charities.
There's also a lovely story about her going down Collins Street one evening after a ball with Scobie in the Rolls Royce, and they noticed a poor mutt in the pouring rain, and she stopped the Rolls Royce, loaded the dog on and brought it back to MOORAMONG the next day, and it became one of their favourite dogs.
The dogs had a good life here. I think any animals would have had a very good life here.
She ordered some dog boxes, dog kennels for the kennels, which were down back at the tank stand. And had to bring them out one day, and they all had to have lift-up lids, and I went over there with her and put them in the kennels and lifted the lids up and showed her, and she walked out with these big plastic bags, and they had these Zonka Brinker blankets in them, so she used to set them in the kennels with that. So.
But she used to go into the butcher's shop in Skipton and buy the best steaks for her dogs. That used to annoy the others. The dogs are in many films, and I do think they maybe took the place of children. Certainly their love of animals probably filled that void, but I think that she did absolutely look at dogs as part of her family. But the dogs were better treated than the human beings, I think.
But Scobie was equally devoted to his farm animals and their welfare.
The chauffeur would take a dead sheep in the back of the rolls to the vet in Geelong to find out why it died. Now, most people around here would say, well, it died, and leave it at that. There are plenty more. But he liked to know why they died, and so the chauffeur, and I don't suppose many vets had their clients rolling up in a rolls.
Of course, Scobie was well known, and the place had such a wonderful record with the cattle here, and MOORAMONG was well known for its cattle sales.
I think he was a very forward-thinking man. He was very quick in picking up new ideas, and he was well forward of the time. He made MOORAMONG a very productive property.
Scobie was a very progressive sort of farmer, and he spent a tremendous amount of money on the property. And he was always sort of first in. His fire truck was always the best. And I remember coming over here with my father to inspect cement tanks that he was putting up around the property. And he was well up with the sort of times in the farming area.
Scobie was a hands-on farmer, not somebody that ordered the men to do the job and just looked at the bottom line. He didn't. He was interested in animal husbandry and pasture improvement, which was something a bit different.
Scobie was a very quiet man. He was very reserved, but he was a very generous man. He'd do anything for you and helping.
And wherever Scobie was around the property, you were sure to find Claire, usually with her camera.
I think she was interested in the business, just the whole works of farming. She certainly was out in the paddocks filming quite a bit of it.
This fascination had its ups and downs, especially when an animal's welfare was at stake.
But it did create its own headaches in places like the shearing shed, because she was just loved animals and hated seeing blood or anything like that. So she was banned from the shearing shed often because she'd try and stop shearing if they cut one.
And of course, all shearers have a little nick here and there. No one's perfect. And she was quite cross about that and wanted to have a couple of them sacked.
Scobie in the end had to ban her from it.
Claire's Hollywood influences were never too far away, and she always managed to look the part.
Well, her dress when she went out into the paddock, she always wore high-heeled boots and a scarf around the neck and looked rather like Tom Mix or any of the cowboy films that we were used to seeing.
You don't often have a film star come to town in a village like Skipton. But she's a very good horsewoman. She was something very special.
As World War II progressed in Europe, petrol was rationed, and farm horses again took on the heavy work. Claire was even having trouble purchasing film for her movie camera. But in 1944, her attention was sharply refocused and her photography forgotten. Her very survival was now on the line. In January that year, a devastating bushfire swept through the Western District. A bushfire that started right at MOORAMONG.
A fire started early in the day from a drover's campfire, and it tore across MOORAMONG. Probably it was the beginning of the fire on the edge of MOORAMONG, so it wasn't huge at that stage, but it came at an incredible speed because of the hot northerly wind.
Nobody'd seen a fire like that. Everybody rushed over here to MOORAMONG to the fire, and we lived on the opposite side, and it only went through the home place.
I'm sure Claire had never been in a fire like that in her life, and they are horrific things for anyone, but she was obviously terrified. But she was determined to save the house. She was just determined, that determination she had, that she wasn't going to be defeated by it. And I think she got burns by the fire, but everyone in a fire puts in, and she wasn't going to be the one that wasn't.
Oh, she did, yes, out there with the mop and bucket, you know, sort of dousing any ember or spark that appeared on the veranda or round the house at all. She just went round and round. It was a 40-degree day or more, and of course with that awful wind and the fire raging round was not pleasant, but she really worked hard and saved the house.
Oh, she certainly did work hard, and I remember my mother ringing up just, you know, after the fire had passed through, and she said, "Oh, Claire and the dogs are all right."
Yes, just kept going with that mop. And then wrote that wonderful letter back to friends about it.
It was like a horrible dream that I can't forget and never will. Donald yelled at me to get into the pool, as we hadn't a chance, and I yelled back at him, "Nonsense, not yet," and ran back into the house to get buckets. I can remember half sobbing, "Oh God, help me. You've got to do better than this, God. I can't breathe, and don't be an idiot, you've got to keep going," and such garbled nonsense. It's funny now, but it wasn't then. The fire caused hundreds of thousands of pounds of damage, untold agony and death of poor sheep, horses, cattle, dogs and chickens, and some human beings. God bless our happy home. We are lucky to have one to bless, and I realize it, and I'm grateful.
Life slowly returned to normal at MOORAMONG. The pool parties continued, and the socialites and dignitaries alike continued to enjoy the Mackinnons' hospitality.
We would go down into the tennis court and we'd chase...
Many of Claire and Scobie's family, friends and neighbours have looked back with affection on those times, in the comfort of the lounge room at MOORAMONG, and through the lens of Claire's camera.
I identified that Mrs. Beery, who had an antique shop. She was the woman that introduced them in London. I remember that distinctly. So
I think the district was sort of open-mouthed with the Hollywood influence that came, and, you know, the bar. I mean, they all drank, but, you know,
they were
actually
shocked by the bar.
Shocked by the bar, weren't they?
Oh yes, it wasn't the usual thing to have in people's houses.
No. I remember distinctly in the period of my mum and dad, silver cocktail shakers and special little sort of shallow glasses with a cherry in it or something else in it.
She was a wonderful citizen in the town, wasn't she?
Yes.
She raised huge sums of money for everything.
For the Mackinnons, the following years saw a parade of famous faces and other visitors to MOORAMONG.
A housemaid who came to MOORAMONG when she was about 16 said Claire was firm but very fair, and I think that's probably the way it would have been for staff. However, they were incredibly generous all the way through with all their staff, and it's really interesting that when Claire finally passed away, all the staff were given a year's wages in the will.
Oh, well, this was home away from home. I don't think Scobie ever sacked anybody I know of. And they used to get anybody who had a job, he had it for life.
I suppose, having no children, they looked after the people that worked here as family.
Her generosity was unbelievable. She was a person who loved people, and that came out. She was very generous in helping people, not only formal charities but individuals. She did a lot of charity work on the side without it really being recognised.
Claire was always willing to make an appearance for the local area, and it was all given to charity.
A former acting pal of Claire's and an Australian journalist, Dorothy Jenner, spent 4 years interned in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. At the end of the war, when the SS Tamaroa docked in Melbourne, a very scrawny Dorothy was met at the wharf by Claire and Scobie. In her biography, Jenner said she couldn't get off the ship and into that Rolls-Royce fast enough. The next day, they motored up to the Mackinnon's property, MOORAMONG. Jenner described it as paradise. She stayed for 3 months recuperating. Jenner said she did nothing except eat and sleep and go for walks. And at the end of the 3 months, she was 2 sizes larger, and thinking that Donald was getting nervous that she might become a permanent fixture. Without doubt, she said, Claire Mackinnon was one of the greatest friends she'd ever had. Dorothy Jenner went on to have a brilliant radio career in Sydney, where she became known as Andrea.
This is your life, Andrea.
Whose life?
Your life.
Mine! Great God! And there she was, on the deck, unable to see us because her glasses had been broken.
That's a dear friend you first met in your Hollywood days, then the actress Claire Adams, now Mrs. Claire Mackinnon.
They were reunited on television in 1974 as part of a tribute to Jenner on This Is Your Life.
She finally recognised us and we rushed to meet at the gangway.
Yes, and it was the colour of your hat that took me. I hadn't seen colour for...
that damned hat.
No, that damned hat was divine.
It went off the gangplank down into the ocean.
Oh, this is the greatest surprise of my life.
My dear, do you realise it's 1920 since we met?
Behave, I thought it was 1919.
Claire Mackinnon, thanks very much for taking part in Andrea's life tonight.
I had to take her up to the country.
Thanks, Claire. Beautiful.
Horses and horse racing were in the Mackinnon blood. Scobie's father, LKS Mackinnon, was the longest-serving chairman of the Victoria Racing Club. The Melbourne Stakes, run at Flemington on Derby Day, was renamed the LKS Mackinnon Stakes in 1936 in his honour and remains today.
Scobie had a love of horses he obviously gained from his father, LKS Mackinnon, who had won a Melbourne Cup in 1914. He'd been chairman of the VRC and a very strong horse breeder and racer in the 20s and 30s. Claire and Scobie had quite a number of horses, and they just loved the racing season and would live in their house in Melbourne during that time because of so much partying going on and racing. They had a couple of successful horses, one that won the Grand National Steeplechase and quite a few others that were very successful.
Of course, the people around here, they loved the races, and that was something they had in common with the racing fraternity, and that was, I think that sort of got them together.
Their public affection for one another remained a local talking point even into their later years. But their generosity was even more well known, generosity that continues even today.
They had no limits to their generosity, and I think they were both, Scobie was a life governor of the Royal Children's Hospital, and they're both life governors to the local hospital here.
Well, she was determined to, join in and be part of the community. And I think that's what, she liked to be active in everything that was going on.
Donald John Scobie Mackinnon died from a heart condition in 1974. Claire Adams Hampton Mackinnon died 4 years later. The ashes are buried under a peach tree beside the Hollywood-style swimming pool.
The National Trust were given this property by Claire and Scobie when Claire finally passed away. Scobie had passed away 4 years before that. And it's interesting, it was a very well-run property, it always has been, and it's a very well-balanced farm that ran grazing right from when it was first settled by white people in the 1830s. Today we do a lot more cropping, but the property is still essentially the same, and their personal wealth was formed into the Mackinnon Trust, which does fantastic things for the community.
While the Mackinnons never had children of their own, children were never left out of the equation when it came to their generosity, delivered annually through the Scobie and Claire Mackinnon Trust. Most Victorian primary schools have a prominent picture of the Queen, but at Skipton Primary, things are a little different.
We have a picture of Claire and Scobie because their contribution to this school is just something that is an amazing thing and a wonderful thing for our students. The big overnight stay happens in Year 2 when our students go to MOORAMONG, and that is a huge excitement for every Year 2 student.
I think it's a good idea to go to MOORAMONG, to be there and go to your first camp there because it's not too far away from home. Had heaps of stuff and interesting stuff. We went to see the pigs and my hat went into the pigsty. She really, really loved the little dogs. She let the dogs in the house with these boots. It was good that she liked dogs and she was a Hollywood star and a Hollywood singer. When we went in the homestead, I got to play on the big piano and I played Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Liked the bar with all the drinks and yeah. They donated their money to the trust and then the trust helps the school.
I think the importance of the Mackinnon Trust, you just can't overestimate really how important it's been. And I think when you think about it, $20,000 every year, when you think of that and how that accumulates and what that means as far as resourcing goes for our students, it's just an amazing contribution.
The Mackinnon Trust gives us $20,000 every year just to spend on things we need, like computers, and sometimes we use it for the trips that we have.
So we get all sports equipment and stuff every year.
I think we're very special because most other schools don't really have that opportunity.
Each year our Year 5 and 6 students go on a domestic tour. One year they go to Tasmania and then the next year to Canberra. The year that we go to Canberra we do an in-depth study of government.
Also a big thank you to the Mackinnon Trust for donating the money to the school so we can go on our camps. I like how the Mackinnon Trust has given us a privilege to go on these camps. Thank you very much.
And I think it's really important that their memory and what they do for us lives on.
Following Claire's death in 1978, the National Trust were made the beneficiary under her will. One of the conditions was that the National Trust acquired the land with the support of the Mackinnon Trust, along with farmland and a reserve, to set up a nature reserve, a flora and fauna reserve in Claire's memory, to be held in perpetuity for the people of Victoria. Claire's will is very clear that we are to preserve and protect the flora and fauna park, and the National Trust really has added on to that its duty of care for the heritage property that is MOORAMONG and the collection that is the MOORAMONG collection, that is Claire and Scobie's collection.
Her jewellery collection was amazing, and it was sold in the early 80s by Joel's, and it actually realised $250,000. There were some magnificent pieces in it. I would hope that Claire and Scobie could come back and feel very comfortable that the National Trust had looked after this property and fulfilled the wishes of their will.
Because it was her very strong wish that it remained exactly as it was when it was lived in by the family. And the National Trust has certainly done its very best to keep that atmosphere. It all works. It works very well as a house, and I think it still works as though the Mackinnons were there.
The Mackinnon bequest has supported a roll call of charities and research centres that have benefited from their generosity.
Under the will, we have to make grants only to charities and charitable purposes. There's some named beneficiaries in the will, but the trustees have a discretion as to which charities of the named ones or others get grants each year. We've also drawn from the named beneficiaries the themes that we think Scobie and indeed Claire would have wanted us to pursue. In the first place, children's charities and children in need, and in the second place, animal welfare and the needs of the rural community.
For the rural community, one of the most enduring legacies is the Mackinnon Project.
Well, the Mackinnon Project has been established by the Veterinary School, University of Melbourne, which is a named beneficiary in the will. The genesis for it was right at the beginning of our trust, right back in 1982-83. With our funding, which was, we made a commitment over a number of years, they established this project, and it provides farmer education, in effect, or information about disease control for sheep and beef cattle farmers. It's a very important source of farmer education in Victoria and in fact, in southeast Australia. Several years ago, we funded the Country Fire Authority at Beaufort so they could buy a new fire engine. We've provided grants for bushfire relief in other parts of the country as well, remembering that MOORAMONG was nearly destroyed by a fire in 1944.
It's an ongoing contribution from one of Australia's early important pioneering families, still helping the current generations of Australians.
The value of the footage is quite amazing because you've got to remember that this film was the film that she went and bought from Kodak, film that she loaded into the camera, film that she sent off to get processed by Kodak, film that she got back and edited and played with and laced into the projector. The mere fact that she was shooting film was quite rare in those days, and shooting home movies was quite rare. Only the very wealthy could usually afford to do it or even think to do it. It's really held together remarkably well, and that's why it's such a great archival medium, and why still today the major studios always transfer everything back to film as tri-separation black and white masters. And that was one of the things about Kodachrome. It was a very, very stable archive medium. Claire's footage is really exciting, as a lot of these old movies tend to be, because they're quite spooky really, because they're little windows into the past that show a way of life that's so different to what we're used to now. And that's what's so valuable about her footage. It does capture a time that we'll never ever see again.
From darkling skies we turn our eyes, content to await the dawn. Can't be the love